Lighthouses are common parts of ship navigation, marking where to go and where to sink. One of the loneliest jobs in the world if they are in a faraway place. However, lighthouses are hard to build or impossible sometimes. And in an age before buoys, solar panels, and window XP, we needed another way to strand people in the middle of the ocean in a cruel science experiment. And also create a light beacon. Nowadays we have Mr. Beast for that, but in the days before automation, we did not have such misfortunes. The only answer? Lightships. These are ships that stay in one place for years at a time, marking a hazard to avoid. Now, it may sound like a bad idea to put a ship in an area to mark a place where a ship shouldn't go. You would be right. These ships would stay in one place for a long period of time, doing that, and acting as a buoy, as we would call them today. But lightships have existed for a long time and aren't seen anymore. Let's explore the rules of navigation. The first lightship was put into service when the Romans burnt a torch on a stationary ship in 10 BC. However, it was quickly discovered that burning a large fire on a wooden ship caused the ship to become 1871 downtown Chicago. Using the TARDIS to jump forward to 1732, when the first modern lightship was moored at the Norbanks, a place that was a hazard to shipping. It ended up working well in keeping ships away from danger, so much so that Robert Hamblin, the man who owned and patented it, sold them to Trinity House. By 1819, there were 9 lightships in the UK. Early ones were unpowered Dutch galleons, which had been renovated for the task. Nor continued to serve for a long time, until 1915, when the new modern Nor lightship was brought out of service, and is now a museum. Now, the Sea Ranch No. 1 buoy marks the spot where men were trapped at sea for months on end and paid for it. Over the next few years, Trinity House established lightships at Goodwin Sands and Norfolk. Over time, it became a more desirable way to mark channels, and because putting a ship to mark a spot where a ship shouldn't go is a terrible idea, obviously, America got involved. The first American lightship was the Chesapeake Lightship in 1820, and it was a small wooden boat, but it was manned. While wood may not sound like a bad option, keeping in the middle of nowhere for 50 years, it worked surprisingly well. I mean, at one point it basically became more rotting than wood, but it served long life. In fact, Light Vessel 16 served for 50 years until it was retired, which is where I got that number from. However, by 1890, they realized that this was not right, and the age of wood was over, so steel lightships became the new fad. The first being LV-44 in 1884. The first self-propelled lightship was built in the Great Lakes in 1891, where seasonal ice required propulsion and steel hulls to withstand ice. 1909 to 1960 was the golden age of lightships, as 56 locations were manned and filled with lightships. All in all, 168 lightships were built by the U.S. Lighthouse Service, and after it was absorbed by the U.S. Coast Guard, they built 6 more. At first, lightships were named for the station they were built in, and if they moved to another station, they would keep the name but be given a new hull paint. However, keeping records became confusing as they went from station to station, so to fix the lightship's identity crisis, they decided to rename it. Every lightship received an LV with a number in front of it, and the ones that were docked in order to relieve other ships when they were in maintenance were called relief. Surviving lightships commonly take the name according to these labels. For instance, the lightship Chesapeake actually served at 2 other stations as well as being used for examinations, and last served at the Delaware station. Most lightships were labeled with LV in their number, but after the Coast Guard took over, WAL was mostly used, probably so the Coast Guard could slap their legacy onto these ships too. but since only 6 lightships were ever built under the US Coast Guard, LV is more commonly used. LV stands for leaky ship, light vessel. Lightships were widely used in World War II as navigational aids and sometimes even to transport stuff. However, some were sunk by U-boats. I assume because U-boat captains who sucked at their job wanted to say that they sunk a ship. But sinking a stationary lightship is like kicking a puppy. It's small, weak, and made of metal. However, in the 60s, the technology came to and eventually was able to place unmanned navigation buoys that were powered by solar, saving a lot of money and just in general being a much better and less cool idea. Over the years, less and less lightships operated. On March 28, 1985, the sun set over WLV 612, and in the morning, there was no lightship, only a buoy. The last lightship was gone. Over the years, most were preserved and kept operating, but now as museum ships or even homes. For example, LV-12 is in Boston, same with WLV-612. The frying pan lightship LV-15 is in New York and is a restaurant, and much more. Also, how ironic is it that a lightship stationed at Frying Pan Reef is now a restaurant? Perfect job, New York. Let's talk about the parts of a lightship. First is the mast. The mast of a lightship is the lightship's glowing heart and soul. Most were originally made out of wood with an oil lamp that was lowered for survival. Later, they were fixed and people had to climb the mast to work on them. They then began being made out of steel around the 1890s, and most were upgraded with electric lights. Later, lightships had 2 masts, one if the first one failed. Hulls were also originally made out of wood with no propulsion. Eventually, their design was perfected to minimize rolling, although another way to minimize that would just be to put it on land. Much of the ship was taken up by storage for lamp oil and other supplies, as well as crew accommodations. The crew's primary duty was to maintain the light. Additional responsibilities included keeping records of passing ships, observing the weather, and occasionally performing rescues. They were Coast Guard ships, I guess. Eventually, they could have more room for cabins as lamp oil was replaced with electricity. They also had foghorns to warn other ships not to hit them. Clearly, that didn't work. Lightships mostly used mushroom anchors. I talked about them in my previous episode, but basically, they work best for keeping things in one place for a long time. The rule was 6 feet of chain per foot of water. Most lightships have simple appearance with short hulls, wide beams, a front-mounted bridge, and, most importantly, red hulls, as well as their station on the side. The Huron lightship was painted black since she was assigned to the black buoy side of the entrance to Lake Huron cut from 1854 to 1860. Also, worth noting the difference between American and British lightships. British ships have one very big mast, as well as a bridge, accommodations beneath, a very rounded bow, and these little inlets at the front, and, in general, they look very similar. America, they look almost identical. Sharp bows, 2 small masts, a bridge usually at the front, although they can be more aft-facing, and their station painted on the side. In the UK, the station isn't always painted on the side, which I found kinda weird. But yeah, you can see the similarities between them, and it's definitely worth noting. Anyways, thanks for watching this video. I've been wanting to make a video on this for a while, because one of my childhood autistic interests was lightships. They just seem really interesting, and they indeed are. Sad they aren't around much anymore, but obviously they're not really needed to be around much anymore anyways. Thank you for watching this video, and I should also note that if you've made it through, my videos have been focusing a lot more on history and not a lot on current ship topics, so list topics in the description of technical stuff about ships that you want to see covered in the video, and I will definitely consider doing that. Anyways, fair winds and following seas.